The great hall of the Galactic Council fell silent as emergency lights flashed across its crystal dome. Councillor Reed, the oldest member of the ruling body, stared at the holographic display with trembling hands. His purple skin turned pale as he read the sensor data again and again. "Impossible," he whispered, but the massive ship on the screen didn't disappear. The council chamber, usually filled with the soft whispers of 200 different species, remained quiet. Everyone watched as the unknown vessel moved through their space with purpose and power. It was unlike anything they had seen before, dark, angular, and massive. Then came the message, simple words that made the oldest and most powerful beings in the galaxy shake with fear. "You should have left Earth alone." Reed remembered that day 50 years ago. He had been younger then, full of pride and certainty. The Council had voted to contain the humans, the primitive species that refused to know its place. Their ships had surrounded Earth, expecting an easy victory. "My friends," Reed spoke to the silent chamber, "I fear our past has caught up with us." Another counselor, Master Bloom, stepped forward. His mechanical legs clicked against the marble floor. "How did they survive?" "Our reports said the bombing destroyed their civilization." The human ship's next message answered that question. A video transmission filled the chamber's main screen. The sender was a tall human male wearing a dark uniform with silver markings. "I am High Admiral Gray of the TSS Nemesis," the human said. His voice was calm, but his eyes held 50 years of purpose. "Your attack on Earth killed millions. You thought that would break us. Instead, it made us stronger." The council members watched as the video showed images from Earth's past. The burning cities, the destroyed lands, but then came something they hadn't expected. Underground cities, hidden laboratories, and a civilization that refused to die. "We rebuilt," Admiral Gray continued. "We learned. We evolved. While you sat in your towers thinking we were gone, we prepared. The Nemesis is not here for revenge. We're here for justice." Reed felt cold fear run down his spine. The Council's greatest strength had always been their advanced technology. But the ship on their screens was using power readings their sensors couldn't even understand. "Send the defense fleet," Master Bloom demanded, his mechanical fingers tapping rapidly on his control panel. "We must destroy this threat immediately." But Reed knew better. He had seen humanity's strength 50 years ago. Their ships had been primitive then, but their tactics had been brilliant. They had lost the war only because they were outnumbered and outgunned. Now, they had returned with technology that made the Council's best ships look primitive. "We should talk to them," Reed said, his old voice carrying across the chamber. "Perhaps we can." The lights went out. When they came back on 3 seconds later, every defense ship around the Council's capital was dead in space. No weapons had been fired. No explosions. They just stopped. The human ship hung in space like a dark star, a reminder of the Council's greatest mistake. "Let me be clear," Admiral Gray's voice returned, harder now. "We could destroy this entire system. But unlike you, we don't attack civilians. You have 24 hours to begin dismantling the Council. If you refuse, we will do it for you. The age of your tyranny is over." The transmission ended, leaving the Council chamber in chaos. Some members shouted for war, others for surrender. A few simply left, already seeing the end of their power. Reed sat in his chair, watching it all fall apart. He thought back to the day they had attacked Earth, remembering how one human captain had fought through an entire fleet to save a colony of civilians. They should have learned then what humans were capable of. Now they would all learn, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Nemesis waited in space, a dark promise of change. The clock was ticking, and the Council's time was running out. The Council's best scientists gathered in the analysis chamber, their instruments pointed at the massive human warship. Dr. Wells, the head researcher, had not slept in 2 days. His green scales were dull with exhaustion as he studied the readings. "It doesn't make sense," he muttered, pressing buttons on his display. The ship breaks every law of physics we know. The Nemesis floated in space like a mountain made of darkness. It was 5 kilometers long, shaped like an arrow, with strange patterns running along its hull. Every scan they sent at it simply disappeared into its surface. "Try the deep scanners again," Wells ordered his team. They had borrowed these scanners from the military, devices powerful enough to see through a planet's core. But against the human ship, they might as well have been using a child's telescope. Suddenly, all their screens lit up with new data. Wells leaned forward, excited, until he realized the truth. The ship was letting them scan it. The humans were showing off. "By the stars," one of his assistants whispered. "Look at the power readings." The numbers made no sense at first. The ship's power core was producing energy equal to a small sun. But instead of burning bright, it was somehow drawing in light and energy around it. "Dark matter," Wells said, his voice filled with awe. "They've learned to control dark matter itself." The other scientists stopped working. Everyone knew about dark matter, the mysterious substance that made up most of the universe. The Council had tried for thousands of years to harness its power. They had always failed. A loud alarm broke the silence. On their main screen, they watched as the Council's defense fleet surrounded the Nemesis. 50 of their best warships, armed with enough firepower to destroy a planet. Admiral Pike, commander of the defense fleet, spoke over the public channel. "Human vessel, power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. This is your only warning." Wells held his breath. The Council ships activated their weapons, their energy cannons glowing bright against the darkness of space. The Nemesis remained silent. Then something impossible happened. A wave of darkness spread from the human ship like ripples in a pond. As it passed each Council vessel, their lights flickered and died. Weapons powered down. Engines stopped. In 10 seconds, the entire fleet was floating helpless in space. "They didn't even fire a shot," someone whispered. Wells studied the readings with shaking hands. The Nemesis had somehow used dark matter to absorb all energy from the ships around it. 50 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy, defeated without a single explosion. His computer beeped with a new message. The humans were transmitting technical data directly to his station. As he read it, his eyes grew wider. The ship's hull wasn't metal. It was a new kind of material that could change its properties at will. The patterns they had seen were actually millions of tiny machines that could absorb or reflect any kind of energy. But the real surprise was the crew size. According to the data, the Nemesis only had 300 humans aboard. A ship this size should have needed thousands. "How is that possible?" his assistant asked, reading over his shoulder. "Automation," Wells replied. "Advanced artificial intelligence. The ship practically runs itself." He looked at more data. "And look at this. They're using quantum computers that make ours look like ancient calculators." The message ended with a simple note. "This is what happens when you force a species to evolve quickly. Thank you for the motivation." Wells sat back in his chair, understanding finally hitting him. The Council's attack on Earth hadn't destroyed humanity. It had forced them to become something new, something more advanced than anyone could have imagined. In the viewport, the Nemesis continued its silent watch, its dark hull swallowing starlight. The disabled Council ships drifted around it like fallen leaves around a great tree. The age of Council supremacy was over. The humans hadn't just caught up to them. They had surpassed them in every way. And they were just getting started. Captain James Stone stood at the command center of the Nemesis, looking out at the stars through the ship's main viewport. At 65 years old, his hair had turned white, but his eyes remained sharp and clear. A long scar ran down the left side of his face, a reminder of the day the Council attacked Earth. He was only 15 when it happened. Now, after 50 years of preparation, he commanded humanity's most powerful warship. "Status report." He called out to his small bridge crew. "All systems running perfectly, Captain," replied First Officer Miller from her station. Like most of the crew, she worked with 3 floating screens around her. The screens moved as she did, controlled by the neural implant in her brain. The council ships remained disabled. Stone nodded, touching the old metal hanging from his neck. It had belonged to his father, who died defending Earth in the first wave of the council's attack. The metal was still scorched from that day. "Captain," Miller said, "we're receiving hundreds of messages from different worlds. Many of them are from slave species asking for help." Stone wasn't surprised. The Council had kept many races in chains, just as they had tried to do to humanity. But humans had proven too difficult to enslave, too stubborn, too creative. He opened his personal log, speaking as he wrote. Day 1 of Operation Dawn. The Council reacted exactly as expected, first with fear, then with foolish bravery. Their ships were advanced but predictable. They still think warfare is about who has the biggest guns. He paused, watching as the ship's AI displayed a map of Council space. Hundreds of worlds marked in different colors, showing which ones were ready to rebel against their masters. "We could have built 1,000 ships like the Nemesis," he continued. "Instead, we built one perfect ship. One reminder of what happens when you push humanity too far. The Council thought they could break us. Instead, they forced us to become stronger than they could imagine." The bridge door opened, and Dr. Foster walked in. She was the ship's chief scientist, young and brilliant. "Captain," she said, "you should see this. Our scans show the Council is trying to activate their old superweapon." Stone smiled. They had expected this too. The Council had a planet-killer weapon hidden in deep space. They thought no one knew about it. "Send the signal," he ordered. Foster nodded and pressed a few buttons on her floating screen. Somewhere in deep space, the Council's secret weapon received a special code, one that humanity had planted there years ago. 50 years of planning," Stone said quietly. "While they thought we were dying, we were learning. While they celebrated our defeat, we were sending spies. Every secret they had, we found. Every weapon they built, we studied. Every weakness they hid, we discovered." His screen lit up with a new message. The Council's superweapon had just turned itself off permanently. Another piece of the plan falling into place. "Sir," Miller called out, "more ships approaching. But they're not Council vessels. They're from the outer colonies. The slave worlds." Stone stood up, walking to the front of the bridge. The ship's AI showed him what was happening. Dozens of ships from different species, all coming to join the Nemesis, all of them carrying people who wanted freedom. "We're not here for revenge," Stone said to his crew. "We're here to fix what's broken." The Council didn't just hurt Earth. They've been hurting the galaxy for thousands of years. He looked at the old photos on his command station, images of Earth before the attack. Green forests, blue oceans, shining cities. Then images of Earth now, rebuilt, stronger, hidden behind technology that made it invisible to Council sensors. "Send a message to all ships," he ordered. "Tell them, the time has come. Freedom isn't given, it's taken. Stand with us now." As Stone watched, more ships appeared on his screen. Not just from slave worlds now, but from Council worlds too. People who had waited generations for this moment. The revolution wouldn't be won with just one ship. It would be won with hope. And humanity had just given the galaxy exactly that. Stone touched his father's medal again and smiled. The real battle was about to begin. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Council turned into chaos within minutes. 200 representatives from the oldest spacefaring races shouted at each other across the great chamber. Their voices echoed off the crystal walls, mixing with the sound of fists pounding on ancient wooden desks. "We must surrender," shouted one member, his blue scales flashing with fear. "Never," roared another, standing up so quickly his chair fell backward. "We cannot bow to primitives." High Counselor Reed watched from his elevated seat, feeling every one of his 400 years. In all his time on the Council, he had never seen such disorder. The mighty Galactic Council, rulers of 1,000,000 worlds, reduced to frightened children by a single human ship. Order, he called out, his voice amplified by the chamber systems. We must have order. Slowly, the shouting died down, but the fear remained, visible on every face in the room. Our military options have failed, Reed continued. Our fleet is disabled. Our secret weapon is no longer in our control. He paused, letting that sink in. Now we must decide, do we negotiate or do we fall? Master Bloom stood up, his mechanical legs whirring. Perhaps, he said slowly, we should tell them the truth about why we attacked Earth. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. Many of the younger council members looked confused. They didn't know the real reason. The secret that the older members had kept for 50 years. Reed nodded slowly. Yes, it's time. He pressed a button, and an ancient document appeared on everyone's screens. This is from our first contact team's report about humans, from 50 years ago. He began to read. The human species shows unprecedented adaptive capabilities. Unlike other races, they can advance their technology at an alarming rate. More concerning, they show no signs of the natural limits that keep other species in check. Given time, they will surpass us all. Gasps filled the chamber as younger council members understood for the first time. We didn't attack them because they were primitive, Reed continued. We attacked them because we were afraid of what they would become. He laughed bitterly. And in trying to prevent their rise, we caused exactly what we feared. But that's not all, said another old council member, standing slowly. Tell them about the labor camps. Reed's purple skin darkened with shame. We had plans to take the surviving humans and use them as workers. Their adaptability, their creativity, we wanted to use those qualities. We thought we could control them, use them like we've used other species. The chamber erupted again, but this time in horror. Many of the younger council members stood up and walked out, disgusted by the actions of their predecessors. My people will not support this anymore, announced the representative from the Star Systems of Light, a younger member of the council. We are leaving the council. We will negotiate with the humans separately. One by one, other representatives stood and declared their independence. The mighty Galactic Council, which had stood united for 10,000 years, was falling apart in minutes. Reed's computer beeped with an urgent message. His hand shook as he read it. The slave worlds, he announced, his voice trembling. They're rising up. All of them. The humans are giving them weapons. Technology. Knowledge. The chamber fell silent again as a new message appeared on the main screen. It was from Captain Stone of the Nemesis. Your time is over. Your empire of lies ends today. Any world that wishes to join the new Federation of Free Species will be welcome. Those who resist will be left behind. As if to emphasize the point, the lights in the council chamber flickered. A reminder that the Nemesis could shut down their power at any moment. We have no choice, Reed said finally. The age of the council is over. We must. He never finished his sentence. The chamber doors burst open as representatives from the slave worlds walked in, their heads held high for the first time in centuries. The revolution had begun, and it had started not with a bang, but with a simple choice: adapt or die. The council had failed to adapt. Now they would face the consequences. Deep in the ancient archives beneath the council chamber, Master Bloom's mechanical legs echoed through the dark corridors. He moved quickly, his robotic parts whirring as he searched through files that hadn't been opened in thousands of years. Behind him, Reed followed more slowly, his purple skin glowing faintly in the darkness. It has to be here, Bloom muttered, pulling out old data crystals. The prophecy about the chainbreakers. Reed watched as his old friend searched. They had served on the council together for over a century, but he had never seen Bloom so desperate. Finally, Bloom held up a crystal that glowed with a deep red light. Here, his hand shook as he inserted it into a reader. Ancient words appeared on the screen, written 10,000 years ago. Beware the species that rises from fire. They will break the chains that bind the galaxy. Their strength lies not in their weapons, but in their will to share power rather than hoard it. We were wrong about everything, Reed whispered. The humans, they're not here for revenge at all. Their communicators buzzed. On every screen in the archive, Captain Stone's face appeared. The human looked tired but determined. "You found the prophecy," he said. "Good. Now you'll understand why we had to wait 50 years before returning." The screens change, showing images that made both council members step back in shock. Hidden human colonies all across the galaxy. Secret meetings with slave races. Humans teaching their technology to others. "We could have built an army of ships like the Nemesis," Stone continued. "We could have come back and destroyed you all. But that's not what humanity stands for." New images appeared. Human scientists working with other races, teaching them, helping them advance. "Your greatest mistake wasn't attacking us," Stone said. "It was believing that power should be kept in the hands of a few. For 10,000 years, you've held other species down, keeping them weak, dependent on you." Bloom sat heavily in a chair, his mechanical legs powering down. "The slave races, you've been helping them all this time." "Yes." Stone's face showed no anger, only determination. "While you thought we were dying, we were building. While you celebrated our defeat, we were teaching. The Nemesis isn't a warship, it's a symbol. A reminder that any species can rise, can grow, can become more." Reed touched the screen, his hand passing through the images of advanced technology being shared freely. "But why? Why help others when you could have ruled them?" Stone smiled. "Because that's what humans do. We adapt, we grow, and we help others do the same. 50 years ago, you tried to make us extinct. Instead, you made us into exactly what the galaxy needed. A species strong enough to break the chains, but wise enough not to become the new chainmakers." Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the archive. Reed checked his communicator and gasped. "The Loyalist fleets," he said. "They're gathering. Thousands of ships. They're going to attack the Nemesis." But Stone didn't look worried. If anything, his smile grew wider. "Look outside," he said. Reed and Bloom rushed to a window. In the space above the council world, hundreds of ships were appearing. But they weren't council ships. They were vessels from every corner of the galaxy, former slave races, younger species, even some council worlds that had chosen freedom. "This was never about one ship," Stone said. "The Nemesis was just the key to unlock the cage. Now, every species will have a chance to grow, to develop, to reach their full potential." The human captain looked directly at them. "You have a choice now. Join us in building something new or cling to your old power and fall. The galaxy doesn't need masters anymore. It needs teachers, helpers, friends." As if to prove his point, more ships appeared, dropping out of faster-than-light travel. The sky was filled with them now. A fleet built not by one species, but by many working together. Reed looked at Bloom, seeing his own realization mirrored in his friend's face. The prophecy hadn't just predicted humanity's rise. It had predicted the end of an era. The truth was simple. Humanity hadn't come to conquer the galaxy. They had come to set it free. The vast darkness of space lit up as 5,000 council warships dropped out of light speed. Their golden hulls reflected starlight, weapons primed and shields at full power. Leading them was the flagship Imperial Dawn, carrying Admiral King, the last loyal commander of the council forces. "This ends today," King announced over all channels. "The council has ruled for 10,000 years. We will not be overthrown by humans and slaves." On the bridge of the Nemesis, Captain Stone watched the council fleet approach. Behind his ship flew 3,000 vessels of the newly formed Free Alliance, former slave races and rebel council worlds united under one banner. "They still don't understand," Stone said quietly. First Officer Miller nodded beside him. "Sir," she reported, "Project Lazarus is ready." Stone touched his father's medal one last time. Give them a chance to surrender. The message went out. Council forces, power down your weapons. This is your only warning. We don't want to destroy you. Admiral King's laugh echoed through the communication channels. You're outnumbered, human. Your one special ship can't defeat 5,000 of ours. Attack. The Council fleet opened fire. Thousands of energy beams and plasma torpedoes streaked across space toward the Nemesis and its allies. The light was so bright it looked like a new sun had been born. Stone pressed a single button. Activate Project Lazarus. A wave of invisible energy pulsed from the Nemesis. As it spread across space, every advanced weapon in the Council fleet simply stopped working. Their quantum drives shut down. Their artificial gravity failed. Even their life support systems reverted to basic backup power. What is this? Admiral King's voice shook with fear. We call it the Great Equalizer, Stone replied. Your weapons are based on quantum technology you stole from ancient civilizations. Technology you never truly understood, but we humans, we learned it from the ground up. And we learned how to turn it off. The Council fleet drifted helplessly, but Stone wasn't finished. All Alliance ships, he commanded, deploy the gifts. From every Alliance vessel, small pods launched toward the Council fleet. As they reached the disabled ships, they attached to their hulls and began broadcasting a simple message. The truth about the Council's rule, about the prophecy, about humanity's real mission. Your crews deserve to know what they're fighting for, Stone told Admiral King. We're broadcasting the Council's secret archives to every ship. Let them decide if your power is worth defending. Within minutes, communication channels exploded with chatter. Council ship crews, learning the truth for the first time, began questioning their orders. Some ships declared their independence. Others offered to join the Alliance. Admiral King watched his mighty fleet fall apart without a single shot fired. No, he screamed. I'll destroy you myself. The Imperial Dawn, running on emergency power, charged toward the Nemesis. Stone shook his head sadly. Power up the primary weapon. The Nemesis's hull began to glow with dark energy, but instead of firing, it created a containment field around the Imperial Dawn, holding it in place. Look around you, Admiral, Stone said. Your fleet is joining us. Your power is gone. The age of masters and slaves is over. All we're offering is freedom. Freedom to grow, to learn, to become more than what the Council allowed. One by one, the Council ships powered back up, not as enemies, but as allies. Admiral King watched helplessly as his fleet transformed into something new. How? He whispered. How did you defeat us so easily? Because we didn't think like you, Stone replied. You built weapons. We built hope. You hoarded knowledge. We shared it. You ruled through fear. We lead through trust. The battle that was supposed to decide the galaxy's fate ended without a single death. The greatest victory in human history wasn't won with superior firepower, but with the simple power of truth. As Stone looked out at the combined fleet, former enemies now working together, he smiled. The real work of rebuilding the galaxy could finally begin. The stars seemed brighter somehow, as if they too were celebrating the dawn of a new age. 1 month after the great battle, the former council chamber looked very different. The old wooden desks were gone, replaced by a circular arrangement where all species sat at the same level. Sunlight streamed through the crystal dome, falling on faces that had once been enemies but were now allies. Captain Stone stood at the center, his white hair gleaming in the light. Around him sat representatives from over 500 worlds, former council races, liberated slave species, and independent worlds that had joined the new Federation of Free Species. The last of the council loyalists surrendered yesterday, Stone announced. The war is officially over. A cheer went up from the gathered representatives. Even some of the former council members joined in, their old pride replaced by new hope. But that's not why we're here today, Stone continued. He pressed a button, and a hologram appeared above the chamber. It showed Earth, not the burning world from 50 years ago, but a beautiful blue planet surrounded by advanced defense stations. For 50 years, we kept Earth hidden, Stone said. We used technology to make it invisible to Council sensors. While they thought our homeworld was destroyed, we rebuilt it, made it stronger. And now, it's time to share what we've learned. The hologram change, showing massive learning centers being built across the galaxy. In these places, humans would teach other races everything they had discovered, from controlling dark matter to building quantum computers. But we're not here to be your new rulers, Stone said firmly. Every world in the Federation will have an equal voice. Every species will have the chance to grow at their own pace. The age of masters and slaves is over. Old Counselor Reed stood up slowly. I have seen 10,000 years of history, he said, his purple skin glowing with emotion. But never have I seen a species win absolute power and then give it away. Stone smiled. That's because you never understood real power. It doesn't come from controlling others. It comes from helping them become their best selves. The chamber's screens lit up with images from across the galaxy. Former slave races building their first starships. Council worlds sharing their technology freely. Species that had been enemies for centuries now working together. The prophecy called us chain breakers, Stone continued. But breaking chains isn't enough. We have to build something better in their place. He gestured to the Nemesis, visible through the dome as it floated in orbit. That ship was never meant to be a weapon of war. It was a key to unlock the potential in every species. And now that the door is open, we can't close it again. Nor would we want to. First Officer Miller stepped forward, holding an ancient data crystal. We found this in the Council archives, she said. It's the complete history of how the Council rose to power, how they kept other races down, how they tried to play gods. Stone took the crystal and crushed it in his hand. The gesture was symbolic. The information had already been shared with everyone. But the message was clear. The old ways were gone forever. Today, we're not just forming a new government, Stone announced. We're starting a new chapter in the galaxy's history. One where every species has the right to reach for the stars. One where knowledge is shared, not hoarded. One where power serves all, not just a few. The chamber erupted in applause. Even the AI systems running the building seemed to hum with approval. As the celebration continued, Stone walked to the window and looked up at his ship. The Nemesis no longer looked dark and threatening. In the sunlight, its hull shimmered with promise. A young representative from a former slave world approached him. What happens now? She asked. Stone smiled. Now we do what humans do best. We adapt, we grow, and we help others do the same. He looked out at the stars. This isn't the end of our story, it's just the beginning. Above them, the galaxy spun on, its stars shining brighter in the dawn of a new age. An age where humanity's greatest victory hadn't come from destroying their enemies, but from turning them into friends. The darkness had lifted. The chains were broken, and the future was free.